The little boy in me is like,
You're being paid for it, suck it up.
I win because I solved this puzzle.
That pep talk didn't really work.
So the chicken or the egg?
That was the big question that we faced.
Suck it up, cupcake.
The biggest obstacle to growth was me.
There's been some snowstorms happening in the new generation.
You've also got personality differences.
Phenomenal.
That might result in a very different way that I might pitch to you.
Round of applause, man.
Move out of the way.
This is almost criminal. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Basset is a trailblazer in innovation and emerging technologies, now leading the charge in automating B2B sales through his AI startup, Super Benji, with a career spanning leadership roles where he launched the Unilever Foundry and founding Cubed, a consultancy that has connected 50 plus Fortune 100 companies to over 12 million innovators. Jeremy is a master at merging corporate strategy with startup agility. On the podcast, he's going to share his insights on leveraging AI, fostering innovation, and transforming how businesses approach sales and growth, whether B2B or enterprise level. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome him to the show, Jeremy Basset.
John, great to be here.
Yeah, it's exciting, man.
That's quite an intro. Yeah. I feel like I'm applauding myself with that intro. That's amazing.
Well, you've earned it. And especially with what you're doing in AI, since November, it's been the buzz. I myself have had several AI experts and leading experts on the show talking about how companies can go to the next level using AI. So you spent 14 years at Unilever as a marketing director, and this is high-level B2B stuff. And you've worked at selling all kinds of different things as well as relationships. So to cut through it all, how did you get good at sales, and how did you fall into sales? Because what I find, most people fall into it.
Yes. Yeah, that was definitely the case for me, John. So I've been, I guess, forced into sales in many ways. Unilever was a great place to start my career, but in some ways it makes you very lazy because in a lot of ways you're top of the food chain when it comes to sales. You're not trying to sell to anyone. Unilever doesn't really do sales. We do a huge amount of marketing, and then of course we sell consumer into Unilever, sold consumer goods into retailers, but there's no real sales involved in, at least my role. I was a marketing director there, but I was sold to a lot. So it was kind of ironic when I then went from top of the food chain at Unilever to very much bottom of the food chain as a startup consultancy, selling back into companies like Unilever. I realized I had to cut through all of that noise as a consultant that I was faced with when I was at Unilever. When you're in a corporate job, like pretty much any of our jobs, John, you've got a huge amount of stuff coming into your inbox, your LinkedIn, and you have to sift through it very, very quickly. And the big challenge that I realized as a consultant trying to sell back into companies like Unilever was that it's tough. It's tough to get cut through. It's tough to get people to engage. These are very busy people. You have to research them. You have to be well informed. You have to be right on point. You have to make your messaging fun, relevant, engaging, short, to the point, all the things that you talked about here. And to do that, that's a huge amount of work. Now, as a founder, you sort of suck it up and make it happen because you need to. But at one point, we had to go from founder-led growth to team-led growth. And at that point, I needed my whole team to get on board with sales. And they were all excited, sales, there's a lot of excitement around sales. You get to engage with interesting clients. You get to think about how you might solve interesting problems. And at the consultancy, you get to design new products that could solve and serve the needs of our clients. But as you know, the first part of sales is a total nightmare. You do a lot of that research. No one replies. You follow up. You chase them down on LinkedIn. You try a new route in. Still no one replies. And it's a lot of rejection. And unless you've got that resilience built up in you, you're going to find that very, very difficult. And that's exactly what my team faced when we went from founder-led growth to team-led growth.
Yeah, and I want to dive deep in that because my first $1 million I made knocking on doors, right? So
wow, amazing.
Yeah, prospecting for me, I would literally approach 100 people a day, whether I'm selling advertising, promotions, fast moving consumer goods. And I learned early on that you need a tough skin. You need, like
Yeah.
rhino skin. I mean,
Yeah.
behind me, I've got, if you check it out, a
There
rhino.
it is. The rhino.
Yeah. And
It's
the
amazing.
reason why I have that rhino is that it used to be our mascot. And things obviously got a little bit easier because you learn how to not really accept rejection of yourself, but of the product or service you have to offer. And you can get over yourself as far as it affecting your ego. And that's what I found, that, it's not about me. It's not about my hair.
That's right.
It's not about
Yeah.
my tie. It's really, are we a match
Yeah.
for, does my product or service serve you? So that's how I approach all sales now. And I've went from, selling FMCG, uh, novelty items, advertising, promotions, ADT alarms, all the way up into now doing B2B software sales because we own a software company, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
but I said I would go deep because it is tough for new people to understand that it's not about them.
That's right. That's a big lesson to learn. And I think the other lesson that they're having to learn is not so much the rejection, but people just not responding. I mean, you can put a lot of time into and real thoughtfulness into reaching out to someone. And you know, you've got a big idea that you think could be a real game changer for them, and then for them not to respond. It's quite tough. So you do need that resilience, that rhino skin. I love that analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. Tough skin as a rhino, right? And so when you did your startup, you were doing founder led sales, you mentioned, right? So
That's right. Yeah.
for me, I 100,000% agree. If you could say 100,000% is relative.
Mathematically, I think that works, John.
Yeah, 50 for me, 50% of the sale is made before the sale. Like, what do you
Yeah.
know about that client, that company, who works there, their industry best practices? What are the biggest problems and challenges that they're facing, and what kind of, you know, research and or gift can you offer them, even if it's, best practices or something, when you communicate with them? Because a lot of people are, unseen is also unsold.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So, that's why I love knocking on doors, and making calls, because I'm going to as long as I get you on the phone, or if I knock on your door, I know where you're at and I'm going to talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. You can engage with people at that level, can't you?
Yeah. And if you don't got the time, no problem. I'll leave something behind for you, and
Yeah.
let's connect at another time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, as soon as you get someone onto a call, as soon as you got someone to open up that door, you got an opportunity. The challenge is, in today's environment where people are not doing slash door knocking, how do you engage people through email, through LinkedIn? How do you get them to come into that funnel? How do you get them to get onto that call, perhaps, if they're not answering a call in the first place? And that's the thing that we've been looking at with a co-cubed, and now later with Super Benji, in solving to that. That's the big challenge that we're trying to solve for right now.
So the chicken or the egg? So did you create the technology and that methodology to do exactly what you're saying, to solve your own problem?
Yeah. So my team, John, they were all excited about sales, and then they realized how much of a rhino skin you need. And they really pushed back. And, being the inspiring leader I am, I said, look, this is just your work. You're being paid for it. Suck it up. As you can imagine, that pep talk didn't really work very well. So what we then did is we said, look, can we automate this process? And that was, as you said in the intro, in November 2022. So GPT had just launched. AI was really starting to get a lot of traction. And we thought, well, maybe there is a way for us to, systematize what we're doing here. We're methodical in terms of we identify a lead, we research them, We create a whole bunch of information around that person. We then put that into an email. We then follow it up. So if you start to map out that journey, could you teach an AI to do that for you? So that was the big question that we faced. Fast forward a few months, we had a very basic product that is basically the equivalent today of you typing into GPT, write an email from Jeremy Basset to John about XYZ. That product worked okay. And then we just kept evolving it from there. We then grew CoCubed by another 35% last year. And that was in a year that was really difficult for consultancies like CoCubed. Most of our competitors went backwards, some went broke, and we were able to turbo charge ahead, largely driven by the work that Super Benji was doing for us. We then realized we'd solved a massive problem for ourselves, but also a massive problem for the industry. And so at that point, we said, okay, look, let's take this out. Let's launch it to the B2B industry as a service that can help them with their top of the funnel. Then the rest is history. We launched that in January. We've been tweaking the product significantly, really investing in creating a very natural tone of voice, a huge amount of research that goes into each message. And the results have been amazing, John. We've got, clients like Morgan Stanley using it to drive growth for their M&A business, right down to two guys who just launched their own consultancy last month. And this is their primary way of growing their business. So it's spanning the whole spectrum and working really well.
So essentially, you're doing CoCube and you're challenged growing your sales force, prospecting, getting leads, because your people don't have the big girl pants they need yet. They don't yet have the rhino skin. And so you've got to coach them, and you're just like, suck it up, cupcake. Do your job, right? And
exactly.
So eventually,
snowflake generation.
I'm not going to say that because I got a lot of millennials that work with me. Definitely, I think there's been some snowstorms happening in the new generation, right? And but CoCube, let's talk about that, because this is a beautiful pivoting story. Beautiful.
Yeah.
CoCube, your main focus. How were you selling it initially? What was the main focus of that product and or service? Let's go into that and how it led you to an even deeper problem of empowering companies. CoCube.
Yeah.
Talk
Great
about
question. So CoCube, what CoCube does is it's an innovation consultancy. It works with large corporates like Coca-Cola of the world. It takes their problems and it finds startups that are solving it. So in many ways, you've got one of the most complex cells in the world. You've got large corporates who are notoriously difficult to get into and are very fussy with how they're engaged with. It has to be ultra personalized. A lot of love and care needs to go into that message. And then you've got a consultancy, which arguably is one of the toughest things to sell because it's not a well-defined product. You're making it up every time you engage with the client and you're trying to customize what you can do around what they need. So when you're pitching a product like that, you're basically having to reinvent the wheel every time and come up with a big idea that you could be pitching to the company like Coca-Cola. That was what CoCube was doing. What we then realized in terms of CoCube very much started with me. I had this experience at Unilever, which is like a British version of Procter & Gamble for American audiences. And that was a fantastic experience. Loads of other corporates sort of needed what we had done at Unilever. And so we were pitching this as, Jeremy's done this at Unilever, he can do it for you. It was very much built around me. It was a founder-led type consultancy, which is what most consultancies are. And I realized if we were going to grow that, we needed to go beyond founder-led sort of story to a company-led story, from a Unilever case study to multiple case studies. We needed to go from founder-led growth to team-led growth. And that's where we got to. So after a few years, we doubled year on year on year, and then we hit a cap. Things just really slowed down. And I realized the biggest obstacle to growth was me. How do I empower the rest of the team to get involved in sales and sort of move out of the way? For me, that seemed like a big challenge because I built this business around my case study. So first of all, we needed to change the narrative. Secondly, we needed to empower the team. Thirdly, we needed to build the tools that the team could use to do that. The net result of that has been amazing. I stepped out of the business last year and moved 100% into Super Benji. The team have really picked it up. We're continuing to grow year on year, 35%, without any founder involved in the business anymore. And that's largely due to sort of equipping the team, empowering them with this AI tool and putting Super Benji to work for them.
Round of applause, man. Phenomenal. What was the aha moment that you discovered that essentially founder-led sales are like mandatory? Like I still do sales myself. And
Yeah.
the reason why is I see it as service and I get to help other people and solve bigger problems. And the curiosity, like the little boy in me is like, I win because I solved this puzzle. Right.
Yeah.
The win is, look, I found the missing pieces to this puzzle and I get to help others. But at a certain point, you become a dancing bear, and a dancing bear can't sing at a bunch of different weddings. It's like we have to do all of the sales ourselves. And, you know, even me in the sales machine, I've had to reorganize how I train and scale sustainable, scalable sales teams, because now B2B, and when you're talking to an enterprise level company, there's multiple factors. You're never talking to one. Most of the time, you're talking to one on many, and you have to jump through a lot of different hoops, just like you did at CodeCube in order to close the sale.
Exactly.
And if you're the only guy that can do it, you become the dancing bear.
Exactly. And I think our journey for that was not sort of clone the bear or, do anything else, but it was somewhat gradual. So first job was to go from me doing all the sales to augmenting me. So how do I use AI and a whole bunch of other technologies, including the team, to basically allow me to reach more people? So the first part of that was, setting up a biz dev email, and some of the team would reply to people on my behalf, and they might even take the call and say, look, sorry, Jeremy, can't make this call. But they would sort of step in. So that was like the first step, augmenting the founder. Second step was then making the founder sort of, in our case, obsolete, but that's not always the way it needs to be. I think, as you said, John, it's important that founders are still involved in some of the sales. That wasn't the case for me just because I've stepped out and have handed over that business. But if people like augmenting you, they can then replicate you and they can then later on do your job. And so that was our journey very much, of people getting comfortable with the process, sort of replicating the process for themselves and then leading that process on their own.
Yeah, I like to say that if you want your success to be automatic, I just did sales training with my sales leaders here.
Right.
And I said, if you want your success to be automatic, you need to be scientific.
Yes. Yeah.
And what I mean by that is by having a framework and or a process, because I don't believe anybody's ever going to duplicate Jeremy or John Rankins. Because we're going to be uniquely who we are.
Yeah.
And they're going to be uniquely who they are. So for me, when you say augment, are you talking about using the similar methodology you use? Because a lot of us, after having done sales for many years, become unconsciously competent reading a room, using situational intelligence, knowing how to connect and move things forward. Whereas, a startup salesperson or a startup SDR or business development manager, in order for them to augment you, what is your methodology for either training them, or have you set up a process in order for them to do that?
First thing is you can use technology to augment you to a large extent. So obviously, I can't use technology at the moment, at least, to augment this podcast. I can't use technology to do a sales call. I can't use technology to knock on a door. But I can use technology to research people, find people, even write to people, even follow up with people. And that allows me to do less of the typing and more of the talking, if you like. So that was sort of the first level of augmentation. Second level, as you alluded to, was bringing the team on that journey, to getting them involved in the process, and literally, like any onboarding process, showing them how to do it, getting them to do it, coaching them on it, and then eventually moving away from that and allow them to find their own space and move things forward in their own way. But in many ways, the way that you might train or onboard a person is also the way you might train or onboard an AI tool. And that's been our big lesson at Super Benji as well.
You went from CoCube and you say, look, we figured this out and we built this MVP, minimum viable product, is, very humble, but it worked, right? And then it became Super Benji. Was it just Benji before?
What's just Benji? You know what, John? I've got 3 sons, and my favorite is called Benji. Just kidding. He's not they're all my favorites. But one of my workmates is like, you have to name this after one of your sons. So we're like, let's go for Benji. And then we couldn't get good CO on Benji, so we went with Super Benji.
Right.
But in many ways, he's my biggest inspiration for the product because everyone loves Benji. He's fun, he's cute, he's always on point, he's very perceptive. He understands, who you are and relates differently to different people. And we've sort of taken a lot of that inspiration and baked it in here. Yeah, that's where Benji comes from.
I absolutely love it. You can see my inspiration is that guy. And
that's so cool.
His name is Sky. Maybe I should change the sales machine to the sky's the limit when I incorporate.
Sky high. Come on.
Yeah, he's already sky high. He's 6 years old and he's 4'3". So
wow,
it's crazy. This kid, man. I don't know if he's on steroids or what. So then, Super Benji. Let's get down and dirty and talk about Super Benji. But before we do that, because I'm really motivated about that, you pointed out that Unilever is like the Procter and Gamble. And, we're oceans apart. I've been all over the world. I've trained salespeople in the UK. I've trained salespeople in literally all over the world, from Australia to taught people how to speak on stages and all over Southeast Asia, even India, man, and the United States. Do you see, and we'll get into Super Benji being able to outreach and do a lot of that work for you. Do you see a difference in sales in the UK versus the United States or the Europe, in Europe?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm actually from Australia originally, John. So I grew up there, very much culturally Australian. I left Australia when I was late 20s. It came to Singapore and then the UK. I think Australia fits somewhere in between the UK and the US in terms of culture, and perhaps a little bit closer to the US. I love the US style of sales and buying. It's very straightforward. You know exactly where you stand. You generally get a clear yes or no from people. In the UK, it's the complete opposite. So here, it's much more about relationships. It's much more about, in CoCubes, when my team was selling in product startups, for instance, we had what we called our 7-step methodology, which was basically 7 phone calls that we needed to get people to a point where they would buy. There's a huge amount of rapport building, relationship, sort of teasing that goes on to get them to that point of writing a check. So,
hey folks, if you're enjoying this episode and you're picking up what I'm putting down and what the guests are actually putting out there, do me a favor, like and comment what you liked about the episode, or even comment what would you like to hear, what topics would you like to hear in the future, because believe me, it matters. I read absolutely every single one of them, and I want to bring you more and more value to help companies scale so that we can grow this podcast to make a bigger difference. Now let's get back to the show.
Having said that, while I love and appreciate the US approach to buying, and I think as a business, it's a much better place to do business in the US, much easier place to do business. I think there's a lot we can learn from the European approach to sales. So number one would be this relational approach. As you said earlier on the podcast, no one likes being sold to. So having a think about what might be a way for us to engage people without us selling to them is a really interesting approach. I love your methodology around how do we serve people. I think that's fundamentally the thing we need to be asking. Sometimes that is, we have an amazing product and it comes with an amazing offer that is really going to serve you. And that in itself is compelling enough. But other times we encourage clients to actually not trying to pitch the product at all. Go in with a much softer approach to sales. So that could be anything such as, at CoCubed, we used to invite people to come along to a group where we had corporate innovation leaders from New York City coming together for breakfast once a quarter. And that was an amazing way to get people together. It was much easier to get people to say yes to that than saying yes to getting on a call to buy one of our products. We would lead with that. People would then get on a call and eventually would get onto the product side of things. So thinking about how do you sell without selling is the second key question. Third one is it often requires lots of touch points. So it's not just about an email or a cold call or a door knock. It's about lots of touch points. So thinking about email and how you follow up there. Think about LinkedIn and how you follow up on LinkedIn. We're even starting to think about handwritten letters, and we're getting an amazing response to handwritten letters, which we can come back to later, as well as the calls. So often, if you can do a combination of these things, you start to become very familiar to people. You start to build up a relationship in their subconscious, at least, that makes that cold call less cold. It makes that email or that LinkedIn less cold. So those are some of the big lessons I think that Americans can perhaps learn from a European context. I won't even begin by saying how much Europeans and Brits can learn from Americans. I do wish we were much more like you guys when it came to buying and selling, but unfortunately we're not.
Well, in saying that, for me, I live in the kingdom of God, and literally, I see it as, a way of growing an organization globally is really understanding the difference in culture, because I've lived in Southeast Asia for 30 years, and it's a passive aggressive society where America, and I love sports. I've always been an athlete. I follow the NFL like religiously. I just love team sports. I love winning. I love competition, and I think it makes us all better. However, the aggressiveness in America, a lot of the times, if you're too over the top, you're going to turn people off in Southeast Asia because they're passive aggressive. And even as a sales leader, and you said it earlier, you said, suck it up. You got to get better at sales. You're getting paid to do this, so go do your job, right? So that's not going to resonate with a lot of people in Asia, right?
Yeah.
Especially the younger generation. So, and even anger, or like sometimes when I get excited, I'm very passionate about what I do. And I've had colleagues say, "John, are you angry?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just super excited." But they're very passive aggressive. So I have to read the room a lot of times and understand, where am I at? Because I need to respect their culture. Like, they see anger as a total weakness. They really do. Like, if a leader's losing his attitude, they're like, that person's not very strong. Look he can't hold his, he has no emotional intelligence. Right. So I think there's a lot to learn from relational selling and what you're doing and what you're talking about. And we use different approaches in different cultures.
Yeah, exactly
From
right.
from when I was young, growing up in direct sales, we used the term chameleon. You've got to, you've got to read the room, and use situational intelligence and understand, if you're pitching a lawyer, it's a lot different than if you're pitching a doctor or an advertising firm. It's just a different way
It's different.
of emotional intelligence, right? And situational intelligence. So How is your AI? Has your AI actually factored in those different, psychographics when talking to different people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of those. So you mentioned the way you might talk to a doctor, pitch to a doctor might be very different to the way you might pitch to a corporate executive. There's other differences as well, though. So you've got, as we've discussed, geographic differences. You've got seniority differences. You've got ethnic differences. You've got industry differences. You've also got personality differences. So, for instance, if I know you're an extrovert, that might result in a very different way that I might
No
pitch to you
way,
than if you're
man.
an
Me, an
introvert.
extrovert.
I mean, I'm just having a guess here, John. I'm not but
You nailed it.
and if you think about it, there's a lot that you can tell about people from online. In fact, there's a tool called Crystal Knows, Crystal Knows, which will tell you the personality of someone you're trying to reach out to. Now, that's hugely useful as a salesperson to think about, okay, if this is an extrovert or an introvert, if you go through the Myers-Briggs type personality profile, they'll basically do a Myers-Briggs analysis on what's publicly available on that person based on their online profile. And they'll
That's
look
called
at things like,
profiling.
yeah, exactly. So if you can take that information, feed that into some sort of approach to sales, then that will help you connect with people in a way that is much more relevant to them. People often come to us and say, look, that's not really our tone of voice. And my biggest thing to them is, who cares about your tone of voice? You should be thinking about the tone of voice that's going to resonate with the people you're trying to serve. And if you can speak in their language using their tone of voice, that's going to resonate much more than if you just try and project what you're comfortable with onto them. And so that's where we're getting to when it comes to AI.
Amen. Remember earlier I said if you want your success to be automatic, be scientific. This is
Yeah.
what Jeremy's doing, and this is the power of AI. It's not going to exactly make the B2B boardroom sale yet, but ultimately taking into account all of those different factors. Before I used to say and inform my salespeople 50% of the sale is made before the sale. Now, with the technology and AI and what you're doing, you can increase that to 60% potentially. And especially with nurturing with this AI, increase your odds, the touch points, increase top of mind. Top of mind is top of funnel. And the more they
Yeah.
see you and hear from you, the
Yeah.
better, as long as
Exactly.
you're bringing value. So I want to talk about that, right? Because a lot of the old methodologies was, even with email marketing, spray and pray, right? The more you bombard people, the better the odds. That's not the same today. Pray is not going to work, right? And just like when salespeople would just show up and throw up and talk about themselves, rather than find out what are the needs of the organization or the customer. So, what have you done with your technology to nurture and give value that's actually enhanced the probability of getting on a call and or getting on the next call?
Yeah. I love this idea of how do you bring value? And I think that's exactly right. We need to be value depositors rather than value extractors. And that's what good sales does. One of the things we often, the first thing we do with our client is we have an onboarding call. It's a 1-hour call. We optimize the messaging during that call. And during that time, what we're helping them think through is what value you can bring to your clients that's disproportionate to the investment that you're asking them to make. So if you're asking them to get on a 15-minute phone call, how can we give them hours of their time back, for instance? If you're asking them to trial a new product or a product that you're selling, how can you make sure that you're giving them a disproportionate value in return? So that's a key challenge that people need to work through. Like I mentioned, this soft sell approach really works well. So thinking about how do we not pitch the product necessarily, but pitch some piece of value that we can genuinely bring them. That's working well. We also, we've got a tool that we use to come up with a whole bunch of these different scenarios that could be right for you. You also mentioned the offer, the disproportionate offer. How do you present an unrefutable offer that someone would be crazy to say no to? That's another thing. I mean, the thing we need to realize is that on one side, we've got an amazing opportunity to bring value to clients, but on another perspective, clients are costing a fortune. Cost per lead is just going up and up and up. It's increased 89% in the last 6 years, which is absolutely crazy. And unless we can start to bring that cost per lead down, we're going to kill business, we're going to kill innovation, we're going to kill growth. We need to do something radically different. If you took that $300, $500, $800 that you're spending acquiring a lead, just a lead, not a customer, but a lead, and you looked at how can we invest that into really serving this person, then your whole sales approach flips on its head. And instead of paying a huge amount of money to Google and LinkedIn to get that lead in the first place, you're starting to push that value into the client. They're going to be infinitely greater and more thankful for that than they will be for seeing your ad on LinkedIn, for instance. So I think what we need to do is take a holistic approach to how do we bring value and how do we share value, and look at how we can share that value more directly with clients rather than putting it into these big platforms.
I love it. I call it, I don't call it the, internet marketers created the irresistible offer. And earlier with my sales leaders, I was said, what do you think and how do you create an irresistible offer? And it's exactly what we're talking about. And I said, it's really two words: risk reversal. Where they see that the opportunity is going to pay for itself. And if we bring enough value in a first conversation, so it pays for itself, even just having the conversation, this is what's going to take our offer and distinguish it, how it's unlike everybody else's offer in the marketplace. So, yeah, I love that. So tell me, what kind of lead magnets and or tripwire offers does your organization utilize in actually getting people on calls or getting them to take the next step?
Yeah, good question. So it's horses for courses here, but let me give you a few examples of what we're seeing is working really, really well. So for early stage startups, inviting people on the journey. Everyone, if you're trying to sell to medium to large businesses, a lot of those people, I guarantee you, are vicariously living through you and are keen to be entrepreneurs at some stage themselves. So inviting them on the journey, that could be saying, John, you got some amazing experience in sales. I would love your feedback on our new tool, for instance. Inviting them on that journey from that perspective could be saying, inviting them to be part of an advisory board or a customer panel where they've got something that they can even put on LinkedIn, for example, to show that they're interested. So not kind of pitch, we're really just trying to get people's advice, get people's opinions. At the end of the day, if it's something that's relevant to them, they're going to buy it. So don't worry about that just yet. That would be one approach. Another approach that we're seeing working really well is bringing people together. People have never been more connected in many ways through social media and other things, but have never been more isolated. And so the chance to get together with like-minded people in your city, notes, ideas, all of that sort of stuff, that's working really well. So how do you perhaps be a convener? You're a more established business. How do you bring people together? And then you've got things like the offer. So you mentioned, how do you have this irrefutable offer? Well, we're working with a publisher at the moment, and what they're doing is they're reaching out to people and saying, hey, I saw the blog you wrote or the podcast you were on. This is exactly the sort of content that we think would resonate well with our audience. Can we have a call about how we can get your content onto our, into our, and then that takes them through a route of maybe there's a free opportunity, maybe there's an advertorial, but at least it gets them into the funnel. The other thing that's working well, we do a lot of work with B2B lead generating companies. And what's working well in that case is, going out with that irrefutable offer, like we don't charge anything. One of the things that's worked well there is, we don't charge anything up front and it's commission only. And that's getting quite a good response as well. But then they preface that with, there's a few points to the criteria that we need to check when we get on a call and just talk through and see if you fit the criteria. They're sort of putting the onus back on the prospect to actually validate themselves. So lots of those things, as you can tell, none of those things that I mentioned cost anything up front. We're not trying to sell anything. It's very much about how do you come up with that irrefutable offer. And those sort of things are working very, very well.
I love it. I love the enrollment. And I love, you're enrolling others into the vision and into the excitement of making a difference and by providing value. And then,
exactly. Yeah.
And then taking it to that next level and creating a community. That's like, unfair warfare, right?
Yeah.
It's magnificent, right? And I never thought about creating a community even within the sales machine. I mean, we have so many clients out there, and there's so many companies out there that need big data and data performance management systems where they can take leading indicators, lagging indicators, and actually scale their business, right? And we can actually do that for them and then create a community of all these individuals, right? Unfair warfare. And then focus on focus groups in the media to promote it.
Exactly. I mean, when you recruit those people into your community, you not only recruit people who want to be connected to each other, you recruit potential clients, you recruit advocates, you recruit ambassadors who are hopefully going to go out and grow that community. So yeah, it really does become this flywheel effect.
Yeah, I like the flywheel effect. Even, the sales machine, you can see our flywheel up there, right? Spinning.
Yeah, I love it.
Our logo. Yeah,
exactly.
Because we want to, sales, marketing, and training. So have you integrated or used other AI products, and have you integrated your system yet with any other technologies to become force multipliers like, the sales machine?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So there's loads of ways that this can really help do the heavy lift on sales. So if you think about what you're already doing with Sales Machine and through the training, you're encouraging people to do research, to find new clients, to prospect those, to identify reasons to engage with those people. That's what Benji does automatically. So we call it sales done backwards. So we've talked a lot about how it's important, most of the sale is done before the first call. That preparation is key. What Benji does is he does that part for you. So he finds, is there a podcast that this person's been on that I could reference and say I've listened to? Is there a blog that I've written that I could reference and say I really enjoyed your blog? Is there an article that they've been in? Is there something on their website that would give me a reason to engage with them? In Apollo, they talk about show me you know me. That's a very limited show me you know me. It's basically taking company overview and saying something generic and then twisting that into something totally irrelevant. But if you can genuinely show people that you know them, that you're interested, our whole premise is if you want someone to be interested in you, show you're interested in them. And so that's something that Benji does automatically. Then you have to think about, well, what are we going to be pitching to this person, coming up with a big idea for them? Again, that's something that Benji does for you. It's then important to think about, well, what's the personality of this person and key talking points that we could use to engage with them. Again, you can research that. You could use other tools to do that. Benji does that automatically. So what he's basically doing is pulling all of that in, sending out that message. When they reply to that message, they've already felt like you've done a huge amount of research on them and that there's a relationship that's been forged. This is not a cold email that we're sending out, John. This is like fully researched, very personable piece of content. So when they reply, it's important that you recognize this is not a cold call. This is a call with someone that is feeling very familiar to you and in some ways feeling like there's a relationship that's been built up there. So it's important that we call it sales done backwards. The reason for that is Benji does the research. You then need to make sure you do that research yourself and are fully prepped for the call you might have. But you only have to do that 30 or 60 minutes of research for the people who are wanting to go that next step on the funnel, rather than the 90+% people who never reply. And so that's where we're at in terms of doing the heavy lift. So as you can imagine, there's lots of room for integrating that tool into Sales Machine, definitely into other tools out there as well.
Well, Jeremy, this seems like an unfair advantage.
It is an unfair advantage, John. That's exactly what it is.
This is almost criminal. I think I should start immediately. So there's no jail time for this, right?
Yes. No jail time, exactly.
No jail time. This sounds like scale time to me. I absolutely love what you're doing. You're a brilliant mind, Jeremy. Congratulations on your success. I run a software company. It's a startup, you know. I bootstrapped this baby with my own wealth that, by the way, I generated. It wasn't generational wealth. I had to earn it. And a couple $1 million in, it's stressful. I've had to rebuild the product a couple times. There's been issues. We've had big time turnover. You know the deal. Yes or no?
Exactly what you're talking about. John, what I love about your story is you've got these bulls around your office. I actually started my life raising bulls, raising a butchery, and then sold them. And that was the way I paid for my schooling, later on for my university. And that's what got me into business in the first place. This whole business as well, like yours, being bootstrapped, blood, sweat and tears poured into it. But the great thing about a bootstrapped business is it has to deliver. There's no buffer. You have to make things work. They have to work for your clients. Otherwise, you're just not in business and you quickly go out of business. If you've got loads of funding or generational wealth, you can afford to perhaps take a few risks and perhaps not deliver on the promises you initially said. And that's what I love about what you're doing at the Sales Machine. I think it's such a powerful tool and platform to equip people with this incredible job and responsibility of driving sales. And our passion, like your passion, is when salespeople do their jobs, loads of people keep theirs. And so the more we can do to equip and empower people to do a great job in sales, I think the more successful we're all going to be.
Yeah, well, you're on your way. You got 50 plus clients. Have you surpassed the 1 million ARR yet, Mark?
Very close. We went live in MVP in January. We really started selling in September. We've had over 20% week on week growth, John, which has been amazing. We should get to million run rate early next year, probably by the end of January. So yeah, we're well and truly on track there. And the repeat rates are great. Client onboarding is great. So it's an exciting journey to be on. But yeah, thanks for asking.
Hey, man, I'm going to throw my hand in the pile. I'm going to find a way that I can definitely help support the cause with, the unfair advantage that's criminal. I definitely am not just going to be a fan, but I'm definitely going to integrate this into my sales team. We can talk offline about Jeremy integrating it with the Sales Machine. I think we've got the same DNA. And I'm all about making relationships where people win again and again and again. So tell me, where can people find you, connect with you, and or play with this technology and see its incredible ability?
Yeah, it's very easy actually. If you go to our website, superbenji.ai, there's a little blue box on the screen and you can just drop your work email in there. Benji will literally do all the things we've talked about in about 5 minutes. He will research your company. He'll find you a lead. He'll research them. He'll work out why would they want to get an email from you. He'll write an email sequence and he'll draft that and send it to you. You can check out how AI is at work. It's a really cool tool. We're getting amazing response from it. We say it's about a 4 out of 10. If we get on a phone call with people, we can then take that up to a 10 out of 10. And we can start to bring in a lot of the things we've been talking about here, John, in terms of how do you bring in a more relational approach to sales? How do you bring in a softer sell? What might be the irrefutable offer that we could offer people from your company as well? So yeah, please do jump on that, superbenji.ai, drop your email in and find the lead that Benji's found for you.
Jeremy, you're a genius. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want an unfair advantage and you want to scale your organization, take advantage of this offer. Jeremy, I look forward to having you jump on again in 6 months. Let's see where we're both at with a little bit of integration and
Yes.
scalability and what we can offer others. Thank you very much for your time today, Jeremy. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Basset.
Thank you so much, John. It's been a privilege.
That's a wrap, folks. Thanks for joining me today. And if you got value from this episode, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and refer a friend. And if you want even more value, go to thesalesmachine.com, click on resources, and there's tons of resources there to increase profits and drive performance in your business. Right on, come on.